What's up everybody, and welcome to a new video. And in this video we continue to go over my notes for the editor in VS Code. And in this video we're going to cover code navigation. So the first point here is about tabs. Namely, open files are depicted via tabs in the title area. And if two files with the same name are open, then the location is additionally depicted. So for example, if I copy this file here into another folder, so for example in this debugger folder, then here you can see this file.py is in the root of the workspace, while this file.py here is in the debugger folder. Okay, so let's delete this again and then go back to the notes. And then here the second note states that if more files are open than can fit in the title area, then a horizontal scroll bar appears. So to show that, let's put the notes over here and then here open some more files. So now there are more files than can fit in the title area, so therefore then we have this horizontal scroll bar here. And here I also have a side note, and this is about some related settings, namely the title scroll bar sizing, and then here wrapping tabs. So let's see those settings. So therefore open here the settings and then search for those. So let's start with the title scroll bar sizing. So this you can set to large. Then you have here a larger horizontal scroll bar. Okay, so let's reset that, and then let's look for the other one, other setting, which was wrapping tabs. So if you enable this, then instead of having this horizontal scroll bar, the tabs will then wrap across multiple lines. Okay, so this is this setting, and with that now we've covered the side node, and therefore then we've covered all the nodes that I want to cover with respect to this first node here. So then the next node states that the dot indicates unsaved changes. So for example, if I add here a new line, then the start here appears, which indicates that there are some unsaved changes. And then if I save the file with Ctrl S, then the start again disappears. Okay, so then I also have some side notes. And the first one is about dealing with dirty writes. So therefore, to show that, let's go to this file.py here, and this I have also opened in another editor. So now let's make some changes within this editor here. So let's simply add a comment and say notepad, and then here let's add another comment that says notepad. And then here in VS Code, let's also add some comments. So let's simply say VS Code, and then here also comment VS Code. So now let's save it first here in this other editor. And now let's try to save it here within VS Code. And then we get here this notification that it failed to save. And now here we have those two options. We can overwrite the changes on this. So this would then keep those changes. Or you can click here this compare button. And this opens then the div editor. And we have already talked about the div editor in more detail, so I will put the link to that video into the video description. But here basically you just have these two additional options. So with this check mark here, you can use your changes and overwrite the file contents. So this would then use these VS Code comments and not these notepad comments. And then here with this change, or with this button here, you can discard your changes and revert to file contents. So in that case, we would then use these notepad comments and not the VS Code comments. And here, just as a side note, this left editor here is read-only. However, this on the right is editable. So here you could also then create, for example, a mixture of these changes. So if I now write here notepad, then we have a mixture of those changes. So now let's simply click the check mark. And now we have saved the file and dealt with that dirty write. Okay, so then the next side note is about toggling autosave. And one way you can do that here is in the menu bar, file, and then here autosave. And then for example, if I here delete the line again, this time we don't see the start because the file was automatically saved. Okay, so those are the side notes, and with that now we've covered this node here. So then the next node is about the actions that you can take with tabs. So for example, if you click it, then this shows the respective file in the editor. So if I click those tabs, then you can see the respective file. And if I click here the X, I can close this editor. Then if you double click, you can expand or shrink the editor width. So if I double click this tab here, then it expands the width. Double click it again, then it shrinks it. Then you can also drag and drop to reorder the tabs. So if you want to change the order of those tabs, then you can do that. And then here by right clicking, you can, for example, pin the tab. So if I right click this and then here pin the tab, then it gets pinned to the beginning. And here some notes are that the pinned tab stays at the front when scrolling. So therefore, let's again open some more files here. And then here, however, there's some peculiarity. Namely, if I now scroll this horizontal scroll bar, you can see that this tab here doesn't stay at the front. And that's because of a certain setting. Namely, this setting is called pinned tab sizing. So if this is set to normal, then the pin tab doesn't stay at the front. However, if I set it to compact, for example, then now you can see that it stays at the front. And this is also true for the shrink option. So if I now use that, then it also stays at the front. Okay, so this is this pin tab sizing setting. Then next, what also happens with pin tabs is that they stay open when using close all commands. So for example, if I right click this here and then say close all, then it closes all the editors except this pinned one. And then if you want to unpin it again, right click it and use unpin, or you can also simply click this pin here. Okay, so this is these are the main notes for pinning. And then here I also have a side note, which is about pin tabs on a separate row. So if we look for that setting, what happens is that the pins tabs get put on a different row, and then you don't have this horizontal, or they don't get pinned at the front, but they get pinned on a different row. So therefore, let's again open some more files. And then here pin this tab again. And now let's enable the setting. And then you can see this pin tab gets on a separate row. And then you can pin and unpin files by simply dragging between those two rows here. Okay, so this is this setting. And with that, now we've covered pinning. And then here's some other options with right clicking is close others and close to the right. So with that, you can then simply close all the other editors here instead of individually closing them. Okay, and then lastly, here the side note states that actions can also be performed on multiple tabs simultaneously. So if you want to select individual tabs, then hold down Control and select the tabs. So for example, if I select this one and then hold Control and this one, now I've selected both and I can then, for example, pin both at the same time. So that's how you can select individual files, and you can also select a range of files by holding Shift. So for example, if I select this first file and then here this first one and hold Shift and then click that, then I've selected all three of those files. Okay, so those are my notes for the actions that you can take with tabs. So then the last note is about some other related settings, and these are these ones. So let's first look here at show tabs. So if we search for that, what you can do is to select either to show multiple tabs or just to show a single tab, so of the currently active editor, or to show no tabs. And then you could use as an alternative navigation here this open editors view. And we've already talked about that, so I will put a link to that video into the video description. Okay, so let's reset this here. Then the next setting is about the opening position of editors. So here, if we search for that, so currently it's set to right. So for example, if I close those files here again, and now if I open a new file, it gets open to the right of this editor here. However, for example, if I set it to the left, then it gets opened to the left. And then you also have the options first and last. Okay, again, let's reset that. And then lastly, here's also a side note, which is about customizing tab labels. So here I provided a link where you can get more information about that if you want to do that. Okay, so with that now, we've covered all the points that I wanted to cover with respect to tabs. So then the next note is about breadcrumbs, and you can toggle them on, for example, via the menu bar, then here View, Appearance, and toggle breadcrumbs. So then they are shown here at the top of the editor. And what they do is they show the file path and symbol path up to the cursor position. So for example, if I open here another file, And here if I put the cursor on an empty line, then you can see here the photos and file. And if I put this on this variable here, then you can also see the symbols. And if you click a breadcrumb, then this opens a drop-down menu for quick navigation. So for example, if you click a symbol, then you can see all the symbols in that file. And if you click a file or folder, then you see the siblings and children of that file or folder. And then here there are also some related settings. Namely, to see those, go to settings here, and here on the side, workbench, and then here breadcrumbs. So here there are then the related settings. So for example, here you can also enable or disable them. Then here you can adjust something about the file path, and then if you want to show the icons, and then here what elements should be shown. Okay, so those are my notes for the breadcrumbs. So then the next note is about scrolling. And here we first talk about the overview ruler. So this is this here. And you can click it or drag it to quickly navigate the file. So you can drag it or click it. Then here this horizontal line represents the cursor position. So for example, if I put the cursor here, then you can see that this horizontal line jumps to there. And if I put the cursor position here, then it jumps to here. Then here there are also gray squares, and they represent context-specific occurrences of a selected word. So for example, if I put the cursor on print, then we can see all the occurrences of this print function in the entire file. And that's because it's a built-in function. And however, if I, for example, now put the cursor on this gameboard variable, then we can see that it only shows the occurrences within the scope of this function definition. And if I, for example, put the cursor here on this gameboard in the global scope, then we can see all the occurrences in the global scope. So this is what I mean by context specific. And then here lastly, a blue, yellow and red square, they represent infos, warnings and errors. And we talked about already infos, warnings and errors when we talked about linting. So I will put a link to that video into the video description. So now just to quickly show that, I've prepared here some code. So let's simply copy that into this file here. And then here you can now see this blue, yellow and red square. Okay, so those are my notes for the overview ruler. So then the next note is about the minimap, and you can toggle that on, for example, via the menu bar. Then here view, appearance, and then minimap. And here again, you can simply click it or drag it to quickly navigate the file. Then the difference to the overview ruler are that the code is depicted in miniaturized form. So it provides a high-level overview of your code. Then the cursor position is not depicted. So for example, if I move here the cursor around, you see that it doesn't get depicted. And then lastly here, however, then code selections get depicted. So for example, if I select here some code, you can see that selection also here in the minimap. And then here, the gray line again represents context-specific occurrences of a selected word. So for example, if I go here on gameboard, then you see then those gray lines. And then here at the bottom, you also see the blue, yellow and red line indicating the infos, warnings and errors. And then if you want to see the related settings, then go to simply to settings, then here text editor and then minimap. And here are the related settings. So you can, for example, turn on auto hide. You can enable or disable the minimap. Here you can set a max column number, then render character, scale, and so on. Okay, so those are my notes for the minimap. So then let's go over the side notes here. And the first one is about fast scrolling. Namely, to enable that, you simply have to hold Alt while scrolling. So for example, if I scroll normally here, then the speed looks like this. And if I hold Alt, then it looks like this. And you can adjust the speed here with this fast control sensitivity setting. Okay, so that's fast scrolling. Then here the next side note is about locked scrolling. And what this does is it synchronizes scrolling across all visible editors. And you can toggle it via the command palette with this command here. So let's go to the command palette and then simply search for locked scrolling. So here we can toggle this on, and then here it's indicated in the status bar. And now if I scroll within one editor, it automatically scrolls the other editor as well. So this can be useful if the content in two editors needs to be aligned. Okay, so now let's turn this off again. So that's locked scrolling. And then lastly, we have here sticky scroll. So you can activate that in different ways. So for example, here in the menu bar, and then appearance, and then here sticky scroll. And what this does is it sticks the starting line of a higher order scope at the top of the editor. So for example, to show that, let me open here another file. So here the sticky scroll. And now if I scroll down, you can see that it sticks those elements here, these higher order scopes, which are in this case based on the indentation. It sticks it at the top. And then if you click the element, you can jump to the respective line. So for example, if I click this element, then I jump to line 49, or if I click this element, then I jump to line 5. And then here there are also some related settings. And the first one is about the default model. So let's search for that. So here you can specify what default model you want to use. And to show that, let's go to this file. And here I've again prepared some code. So let's copy this. So now if we use this outline model here, then it sticks only those first two lines here, in this case at the top. And if I now use this folding provider model, then you can see that it actually sticks the first 3 lines at the top. And then if I use here this indentation model, then you can see that it actually sticks those first 5 lines at the top. Okay, so this is this setting. The next one is then this max line count. And with that, you can simply specify how many lines there should be at max in this sticky scroll here. So for example, if I set this here to 6, then we get here an additional line. Or if I set it to 3, then we only see here 3 lines. Okay, so let's reset that. So that's the max line count. And then lastly here we have scroll with editor. So let's search for that. And by default this is enabled. So in that case, what happens here, if I scroll horizontally, then the sticky scroll scrolls with the editor. And if I disable it, then the sticky scroll stays at the front. Okay, so those are the settings here. And with that, now we've covered all the side nodes. And with that, then all the nodes that I wanted to cover with respect to scrolling. So then the next node is about the search within file functionality. And to open that, you simply have to press Ctrl F. So if I press Ctrl F, then here this find widget opens. And if the cursor is currently placed on a word, then the input box is automatically populated with that word. So to show that, let's go back here to this file. And then let's just quickly delete this here at the end. And then scroll to the beginning. And here, for example, if I put the cursor on game board and then press Ctrl F, then you can see this input box is already populated with game board. And if you don't want that behavior, then you can adjust that via this setting here. So if I go to settings and then search for that, then here you can see it is by default it is set to always, but you can also set it to never. So then if I delete this here again and then close it and put the cursor now on game board and now press Ctrl F, now it's not populated. And you can also set that to selection. So in that case, then if I put the cursor on this game board and press Ctrl F, then it's not populated. However, if I select this word here or this game board and then press Ctrl F, then it's actually populated. Okay, so this is the setting. So let's reset that. And then here, the next node states that the search results are highlighted in orange, namely in the editor here, as you can see, then also in the overview ruler, and also in the minimap if you have that enabled. Okay, so then let's get to the search actions. Namely, these are these here. And with these arrows here, you can go to the next match or to the previous match. With this find in selection here, you can search just in a respective selection. So for example, if I select this function here and then toggle this on, then we are only searching within that selection. So in this case, then we only have 4 results. And if I toggle this off again, then there are again 28 results. And then lastly here with this X, you can close this find widget, or you can also just press escape. Okay, so those are the search actions. So now let's get to the search options. Namely, the first search option is to match case. So for example, if I search here for game with a capital G, then if this option here is turned off, then we have these 45 results. And if I turn this on, then we only have this one result here. So that's match case. Then the next one is to match the whole word. So what that does is that it doesn't match if there are any letters, numbers or underscores right before or after the search term. So for example, if I turn this on, then we only have 5 results, and all of these results are results where there's no letter, number or underscore right before or after the search term. So that's that. And then lastly, here we have regular expressions, and I don't know how to use them, so I can't really show you an example. So those are the search options. So now let's get to the replace functionality. Namely, you can access that by clicking this arrow here on the left hand side. And now to show how that works, let's search for game and let's replace that with play. And the replacement options that you have here is to replace just a single instance. So for example, if I click that, then only this instance here gets replaced and not the other ones. And if you replace all, then you simply replace all the instances in that file. So now let's undo this. And then here you also have the option to preserve the case. So for example, if you go to this instance here game is written with a capital G. And now if I replace that with this preserve case toggled off, then play is going to be written with a lowercase p. So if you want to preserve the case, then simply toggle this on and then replace it, and then play is going to be written with a capital P. Okay, so again, let's undo this. So this is how the replacement functionality works. So now let's go over the side notes here. And the first one states that you can use the up and down arrow keys to scroll through the search history. So for example, if I use those keys, then I can scroll through here the search history. And then the second side note is about multi-line search. Namely, you can do that via Control Enter. So for example, if I search here for function and then press Control Enter, then I can add an additional line. So for example, if I search here for def, then we get 0 results. However, if I insert here 4 spaces, then we get here this one search result. So the search here is basically treated as a continuous string. Okay, so with that now, we've covered all the nodes that I wanted to cover with respect to the search within file functionality. So now let's get to the go to functionality, and you can access that by right clicking. And the first one that we're going to look at is go to definition. Namely, what it does is it jumps to the definition of a symbol. So for example, if I put here the cursor on players and then right click that and then go to definition, then we get to this line where players is assigned. And if I do the same thing on make move here on this make move function call and then say go to definition, then we get to the definition of that function. So then the next note is that if there are multiple definitions, then an inline window opens. So for example, if I put the cursor here on game status and then go to the definition on that, then this inline window here opens. And here at the top, the file name is depicted, then here the absolute path, and then here the number of definitions. So here we have 2. And then here, if you click an entry, then you can preview that entry. And if you double click, then you jump to the respective line. And here then, just as a side note, what you also can do is the following. Namely, simply drag such an entry here into a new editor, and this way you can also open that entry. Okay, so then the next note is that this go to definition functionality also works across files. So for example, therefore I've prepared another code example. So let's paste this here. So now if I put the cursor on random and then say go to definition, then we open here random.py. And if I do that for sample, then we get here to this place. And then here, if I again go to the definition on the sample, then we get here to the definition of that function. And then lastly, here's also a side note, namely there are some alternatives that you could use. Namely, you could simply control click a symbol and then jump to the definition. So for example, if I control click random, then this opens here again this file. Or you can also use control alt click, and this then opens the definition to the side. So for example, if I here control alt and click, then we open it here to the side. Okay, so those are my notes for go to definition. So next is go to declaration. and this jumps to the declaration of a symbol. And for Python, this means that it jumps to the respective .py file if available. So for example, if I right click here sample and then go to declaration, then we get to this random.py file. And then otherwise, it has the same behavior as go to definition. So for example, if we go back to code navigation.py and then here right click make move and then go to declaration, then we again jump to the definition of make move. Okay, so this is go to declaration. So next is go to type definition. And when this is used with a variable, then it jumps to the definition of the underlying data type and not the definition of the variable. So to show you what I mean by that, I've prepared here some code. So let's go to this file here again and then paste this. So now if I right click here instance and then go to definition, then it jumps to this line here where the variable is assigned. However, if I right click it and then go to type definition, then it jumps to the definition of this class here. And then otherwise it again has the same behavior as go to definition. So for example, again, if I go here to make move and then say go to type definition, it again jumps to the definition of this function. So this is go to type definition. So next is go to implementations. So what that does is for an interface, this shows all the implementers of that interface. And for abstract methods, this shows all concrete implementations of that method. So to show an example for the second point here, I have prepared some code. So let's paste this. So here I have an abstract method and here are the implementations. So now if I right click this speak function here and then say go to implementations, then here we only see those two implementations of this abstract method. However, if I, for example, go to definition, then we can see that we actually see all the instances of this speak function. Okay, so this is go to implementations. So then lastly is go to references. And this jumps to the place where the symbol is referenced. And if there's a single reference, then it directly jumps to that reference. So for example, if I right click here, make move, and then say go to references, then we get to this function call of make move. And if there are multiple references, then again, this inline window opens. So for example, if I scroll up again and then here right click show, and then go to references, then we again get this inline window here. Okay, so this is go to references. So now let's go over the side notes here. And the first one states that this go to functionality is language specific. So some of these functionalities here might not be available for a specific language. And then here the next side note is about peeking. Namely, instead of, for example, jumping directly to a definition. So for example, if I right click here, make move, and then say go to definition, and directly then jump to this function definition, what you also can do is to peek that definition. So for example, if I right click this here, and then here go to peek, then you can here peek, for example, the definition, and this again opens then this inline window here. Okay, so those are the side notes. And with that, now we've covered all the points that I wanted to cover with respect to the go-to functionality. Okay, so then lastly, let's go over the side notes. And the first one is about folding. So to show how that works, I've prepared some code. So let's copy that, paste it into this file here. And then here the first note states that if you hover over the gutter, then this shows all foldable regions with this down arrow here. So if I hover over the gutter here, then you can see all those foldable regions. And then if you click that, then you can fold that respective region. So then the folded region is depicted with this right arrow. And this right arrow here actually stays even if you're not hovering. And if you click that, then you can again unfold this region. Then here the next note says that if you use shift click, then you can fold or unfold all the regions inside the region. So for example, let's say you wanted to fold all the regions here in this class. So instead of doing this here, for example, individually, what you can do instead is use shift click. So for example, if I here shift click then this class, then everything inside that gets folded. And the same thing then also is true the other way around. So now if you want to unfold it again, you don't have to do this individually, but instead you can simply hold shift while you now unfold this class here. So then everything gets again unfolded. Okay, so this is the second point. And then here lastly, there's a side note, namely that regions can also be defined by markers, and those markers are specific to each language. So here's a link where you can see all the different markers for specific languages. For example, for Python, it's this end region and this region and end region comment. So to show how that works, let's go back here to code navigation.py. So here on this file, we have here the actual code, and then here at the top, there are all the function definitions. So let's put them into a region. So if I enter here this region comment, and then after that, let's say here end region, then now I can actually fold all those definitions here. And then the next note here states that the minimap depicts the folding marker names. So for example, if I toggle the minimap on again, and then here type, for example, that these are the functions, then this gets depicted in the minimap. Okay, so those are those markers. So now let's again toggle off the minimap and then remove those markers again. And then here the second note is that regions can also be created from selections. So for example, if I select everything here to the top, so all those definitions, and then what you do is you go to the command palette and use these commands here. So again, let me select that. And then command palette. And then here is this command create folding range from selection. So now we have created this folding range here for the definitions. And again, if you want to disable that, then use this remove manual folding ranges command. So now this folding range is removed. Okay, so those are all my notes for folding. So then the next side note is about indent guides, and these are vertical lines that indicate indentation levels, and this can be useful for navigating nested code structures. So for example, if you have here a code like this, and I however have disabled them, so if you want to enable them, you can use this setting here. So if we go to settings and then search for that, then here you can enable those indent guides. So those are here, those indent guides. And then the next note here says then that the currently active indent guide gets highlighted. So for example, if I put the cursor here on this while loop, then you can see all of this code belongs to this while loop. And if I put it on this while loop, then you can see that all of this belongs to that. Okay, I however prefer to not use them. So let's toggle them off again. And these are now all the notes I want to mention with respect to indent guides. So now let's get to the next side note, which is about bracket pairs. Namely, opening and closing parentheses, brackets, and braces can be colorized. And to show that, I've prepared here an example. So let's paste this here. And here, as you can see, the parentheses are now currently not colorized. And if you want to colorize them, go to the settings and then search for bracket pair. Bracket pairs. So here, as you can see, by default it's actually enabled, but I disabled it. So now let's enable it again. And then you can see these parentheses are now colorized. And here I also have a side note. Namely, by default, there are 3 different types of colors. So these colors here that are depicted. However, you can customize those colors. And to do that, let's go back here to the settings. Then here in this setting, click this Workbench Color Customizations link. And then here in this setting, click Edit in settings.json. So in this attribute, then here you can specify different colors for these parentheses. So I've already prepared some colors here. So let's paste this in. And now, as you can see, those colors here change. Okay, so again, now let's delete this again. So now we have the original colors. And now let's go back to the notes. And here the second note states that guides of opening and closing parentheses, brackets, and braces can also be colorized. And to show that, I've again prepared some code. So let's paste it into here. And now let's activate those colorized guides. Therefore, again, let's go to the settings and search for bracket pair. And then here for this setting, set this to true. Then we get these colorized guides. So for example, then if I put here the cursor on screws, then we can easily see what belongs to ordered items. If I put it here on name, then we can see everything that belongs to ID2. And if I put a cursor on ID2, then we can see everything that belongs to customers. Okay, so these are my nodes for bracket pairs. So then the last side note is about vertical rulers. Namely, you can add vertical column rulers to the editor via this setting here. So if we search for that, then we get to this setting here, and then you can again edit that in the settings. And here you can then specify some rulers. So for example, if I put in here a 20, then this adds then this vertical ruler at column 20. So if I then 40, then we get another vertical ruler. Okay, so these are then those vertical rulers. And with that, now we've covered all the side nodes. And with that, then we have covered all the nodes that I wanted to cover with respect to code navigation. So we've reached the end of this video, and then in the next video, we're going to go over the nodes for running code. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.